No matter where the fuck I am, I'm here.
Done. God forgives everybody.
The trailer for Power Book 3, Raising Kanan Season 5, Episode 4, landed like a gut punch, and fans are still trying to process exactly what they just watched. Every frame felt like a countdown clock ticking towards something nobody is ready for. Will Kanan actually go through with using Tiana to destroy Rack's Manhattan operation? Is Taz finally about to snap and turn his resentment into something violent against Kanan and Breeze? Has Stefano's veiled threat already set a chain of events in motion that nobody can stop? Is Jukebox's deal with Detective Garcia about to collapse and take her down with it? Will Rack discover her son's betrayal before she can protect what she just built? Every single one of those questions has an answer, and this breakdown covers all of them. There is real tension building elsewhere too. Will Marvin finally confront Rack about the choices that got Lou killed, or is he going to keep swallowing that grief in silence for the rest of the season? Every one of those threads is converging at once. And that convergence is exactly why this episode matters so much. The single most important moment in this trailer is the doorway. Tiana, one of Flossie's escorts working the new Manhattan pipeline for Rack, rushes to a client's apartment, and when that door swings open, it's Kanan standing on the other side. It is a genuinely chilling beat. The kind of image that recontextualizes everything fans thought they understood about where this season was heading. Up until that exact second, there had been zero indication that Kanan even associates with escorts, which makes the coincidence land as anything but a coincidence. He had just walked out of a conversation with Stefano, who made it unmistakably clear that something needs to happen to Rack, and now he's standing in the doorway of one of the very women running his mother's new business. For a moment, it almost feels like hope, like maybe this is just Kanan blowing off steam, separate from the war brewing around him. However, the situation is far more complicated than it appears on the surface. Because nothing in this show happens by accident, and a character as calculating as Kanan does not wander into a stranger's apartment unless there's an angle. The tragedy of Kanan's situation is that every version of him fans once recognised, the kid who wanted his mother's approval, the kid who hesitated before pulling triggers, has been stripped away piece by piece. And what's left is someone willing to use anyone, including people with no stake in his war, just to get to Rack. There was a brief sense of relief watching Kanan and Breeze's business thrive without Unique dragging them down. Real momentum, real power consolidating in their hands. However, unfortunately, that momentum is exactly what's pushing Taz toward the edge. And the closer Kanan and Breeze get, the more dangerous the resentment simmering on the sidelines becomes. For a while, it looked like Kanan had finally found the stability he'd been chasing since the very first season. A real partner in Breeze, real territory, real respect on the streets. However, unfortunately, stability built on this many secrets was never going to last. And the doorway scene proves that the cracks were already there before fans even noticed them forming. What makes this moment so painful for fans who have followed Kanan's journey since season 1 is watching him become the exact kind of person his mother always feared he'd turn into, and the doorway scene is the clearest evidence yet that there's no walking it back. The most likely explanation for what fans just witnessed in that final trailer beat is that Kanan is not pursuing Tiana out of any personal interest at all, but using her specifically as a pressure point against Rack's new Manhattan pipeline. The evidence strongly suggests this reading holds up. The proof is visible in the sequence of events laid out across the episode leading into the trailer's final image. Stefano explicitly tells Kanan about his mother's escort-driven business model. Kanan appears to brush the information off entirely, and then, almost immediately afterward, he's standing in Tiana's doorway. The trailer makes it clear that timing like that is never accidental on this show. Fans believe Kanan is using Tiana either to gather intelligence on how Rack's operation actually functions, or to compromise it from the inside by turning one of its key workers against the network she's been recruited into. The most logical conclusion, given how methodically Kanan has approached every other obstacle this season, is that he wouldn't risk exposure for anything less than total leverage over his mother's new business. And if this theory proves correct, the consequences for Rack are enormous. It would mean her son isn't just emotionally estranged from her anymore. He's actively working to dismantle the one thing she managed to build for herself after barely surviving his bullet at the end of last season. It would mean the war Stefano wants is already underway, and Rack doesn't even know it yet. However, unfortunately, the longer Rack remains unaware, the more damage Kanan can do before she ever gets the chance to defend what's hers. But that development raises an even more dangerous question about Tiana herself. Because if Kanan is using her, she becomes collateral in a war she has no idea she's part of. The evidence also points to something building quietly around Detective Garcia and Jukebox that fans cannot ignore. The most logical conclusion, based on everything established so far, is that the pseudo-partnership Jukebox struck with Garcia was never going to hold for long. What the show is building toward is a betrayal, either from Garcia deciding the money isn't enough and turning on her anyway, or from Jukebox realising too late that she handed a corrupt detective leverage over her entire family. The trailer makes clear that Jukebox is moving further away from the version of herself fans met in earlier seasons, the more empathetic sister and daughter, and further into someone who treats every relationship as transactional. Every detail in this season points to her hardening in real time, and the deal with Garcia is the clearest symptom of that shift. The trailer makes it clear that Jukebox believes she's in control of the arrangement, but the evidence suggests otherwise, since Garcia is the one holding the badge and the leverage, not her. And if this theory proves correct, the consequences for Marvin and the rest of the Thomas family are enormous, because Jukebox working both sides of the law means she's one misstep away from bringing Garcia's investigation directly into their home. However, unfortunately, Jukebox has never been the type to back down once she's committed to a plan. Which means the most likely outcome is that she pushes forward even as the risk multiplies around her. But that development raises an even more dangerous question about Taz, because while Jukebox is making calculated moves with full awareness of the risk, Taz is doing the opposite, and an unpredictable man with a grudge is often more dangerous than a calculated one. Taz has been pushed to the margins all season, and the most likely explanation for his trajectory is that he is on a collision course with either Kanan or Breeze, or possibly both. The evidence strongly suggests this is where his arc is headed. He was already punched someone earlier this season, simply for pointing out that Kanan had effectively replaced him at Breeze's side. Which tells fans everything they need to know about how close to the surface his anger already sits. What the show is building toward, according to the patterns established across these episodes, is a moment where Taz's resentment stops simmering and starts costing people their lives. Fans believe the most dangerous version of this theory involves Taz feeding information to Stefano, or even to Rack herself, using whatever he knows about Kanan and Breeze's operation as leverage to reclaim the position he feels he's owed. The trailer makes clear that Breeze trusts Kanan more than anyone else in his orbit at this point, which leaves Taz isolated. And isolated men in this universe tend to make catastrophic decisions. However, unfortunately, Breeze's blind trust in Kanan is exactly the kind of vulnerability this show has exploited before, and there's nothing currently protecting that alliance from a well-timed betrayal. And if this theory proves correct, the consequences for Kanan are enormous. Because the betrayal would come from inside his own camp, from someone he never bothered to take seriously as a threat. That kind of blindside has ended characters on this show before, and Kanan's growing arrogance makes him exactly the kind of target fans worry could be caught completely off guard. The most logical conclusion, watching how confidently Kanan has been operating lately, is that he genuinely believes nobody close to him would ever turn, and that exact blind spot is what makes Taz's resentment so dangerous heading into episode 4. While the main conflict between Kanan, Rack and Stefano dominates the trailer, there is another storyline quietly unfolding in the background that every fan needs to pay attention to, and it centres on Marvin. Marvin has spent this season absorbing grief that nobody else in the family seems willing to sit with, mourning Lou in near silence while everyone around him moves forward with business as if nothing happened. His confrontation with Kanan, where Kanan offered him a job with almost total indifference, only to be met with a brutal verbal takedown, was one of the most memorable exchanges of the season so far, and it revealed exactly how much Marvin sees through Kanan's new persona. What makes this moment so painful for fans is that Marvin has always been the quiet conscience of this family, the one person willing to call out the rot before it spreads. And now he's standing at the centre of Rack's new Manhattan venture with Flossie, helping run a business built on the same kind of exploitation that has hollowed out everyone else in his orbit. However, unfortunately, Marvin's proximity to that business is exactly what puts him in the most danger if Kanan's plan against Tiana ever comes to light, because he won't have the luxury of staying neutral once the truth surfaces. The evidence suggests Marvin's arc is heading toward a breaking point of his own, separate from, but connected to the larger Kanan versus Rack war. If Tiana's situation with Kanan becomes public knowledge, Marvin is one of the people most likely to discover it first, given his proximity to Rack's operation, and that discovery would force him into an impossible position, choosing between protecting his sister and exposing his nephew. Every fan who has followed Marvin's journey will feel the weight of that choice the moment it arrives, because unlike Kanan, Marvin still has a conscience left to lose. There is also a connection worth drawing between this season's central betrayal and the larger arc Sacha Penn has been building since the very beginning of the series. The showrunner has said publicly that he always envisioned this story running exactly 5 seasons, and that intentionality shows in how deliberately the show is closing every loop it opened years ago. The premiere's shocking death of Lou, the Uncle Kanan accidentally killed while trying to shoot his way out of a confrontation with his mother, set the tone for a season built on irreversible consequences, and the doorway scene with Tiana feels like the next domino in that same chain. There was hope, briefly, that Kanan might be allowed some kind of redemption arc once the dust from Lou's death settled. However, unfortunately, every choice he's made since that opening sequence has pushed him further from redemption and closer to becoming the very thing his mother spent years trying to shield him from. What the show is building toward, based on everything confirmed so far, is a final stretch where every character's worst impulse gets paid off in full, with no one left untouched by the fallout. Fans believe the timeline now points toward Kanan and Rack's confrontation escalating dramatically by the mid-season mark, especially with Stefano applying pressure from one direction and Taz applying it from another, squeezing Kanan into a corner that even his calculation might not be able to talk his way out of. Every detail the show has planted across this final season suggests Penn has been building toward this exact collision since the very first episode, which is precisely why episode 4 feels like the moment everything finally starts to tip. After everything this trailer has revealed, after all the theories and all the questions it has raised about Tiana, about Taz, about Marvin's breaking point and Rack's blind spot, the one question that every single fan is now focused on is the simplest and most important of all. When does this actually air? Episode 4, officially titled Pawns and Rooks, is confirmed to premiere Friday, July 3rd, dropping at the usual 8 p.m. Eastern slot on Starz and arriving even earlier on the Starz app and streaming platforms, continuing the show's steady weekly Friday rollout. That timing lands the episode on a holiday weekend, which fans should keep in mind when planning their viewing schedule. The official synopsis confirms that Rack's war with Kanan, Breeze and Stefano grows increasingly violent in this episode, that Kanan's deception of Tiana escalates exactly as this trailer suggests, and that Jukebox's misstep leaves her under real and immediate threat. With only 8 episodes total this final season, and the series finale already locked for August 7th, every remaining episode is carrying enormous narrative weight, and Pawns and Rooks looks built to detonate several fuses at once. Based on everything the production timeline has confirmed so far, the wait is going to be significantly shorter than most fans are expecting, and based on what this trailer has shown, that wait is going to feel very long indeed. Now the conversation moves to the fans. Is Kanan using Tiana purely as a weapon against Rack, or is there something more personal pulling him toward that doorway that even he hasn't fully admitted to himself? Will Taz's resentment explode into open betrayal against Breeze and Kanan before the season reaches its midpoint? Or is the show holding that detonation for the finale stretch? And when Marvin eventually learns what his nephew has done, does his conscience finally break the family apart for good? Or is he the one person strong enough to hold what's left of it together? One more question worth sitting with. Does Jukebox's arrangement with Garcia survive episode 4? Or has she already made the mistake that comes back to haunt the entire Thomas family? The video on screen covers everything else fans need to know before the next episode drops.